syringe back. Ah, there you are. You must be the assistant that's been assigned to work tonight's evening shift. It's nice to meet you. I think you're in for a real treat this evening. We have one of the most spectacular Totodile species I've ever seen. The molecular structure of this particular Totodile's water gun is unlike anything I've ever witnessed before. So please get your things situated and let's get ready to begin. We have a lot of work to do. I'll give you a quick rundown of what we are going to do. Of course, we have a very peacefully resting and asleep Totodile before us. A quick snack is all it really took for it to nestle into this cozy bed and fall asleep as we run a few harmless tests and get it back to its trainer as soon as possible. So what we're going to do is run a few tests on some various water samples of its water gun. Of course, we can take those while it's asleep. We'll run through some of the various data points that are important to study with a Pokemon like this, and all the while we're going to try to keep it very quiet and make sure that this Totodile remains asleep and at rest. Alright? Okay, the first thing that I actually need you to do, can you hit that switch there behind you? We need to get our humidifier system up and running in order to make sure that we keep the scales of the Totodile cool and slightly damp. So that blue switch right there. Thank you. That should be the auxiliary power if I can get it powered up here. Alright, perfect. We'll just let some of that vapor waft through the air and gently moisten the scales of the Totodile. That's perfect. Alright. It's important to keep the air cool when dealing with water-type Pokemon, especially water types with scale-like skin, such as Totodile. Alright, so we do have a juvenile Totodile here, level 13, which is one other reason that it's so spectacular that such a powerful water gun has been observed. And like I said, it's not just the power of the water gun, it's actually the molecular makeup. We were fortunate enough to get our hands on a residual sample left behind after a nearby Pokemon trainer battle, and the need for further testing was evident, and the trainer so graciously obliged. The first thing that we are going to do is we're just going to get a bit of relaxing mist spritzed in the air here to go along with our humidifier. This is just going to ensure that the Totodile remains in that very peaceful sleep. This has hints of lavender, splashes of eucalyptus, and a few citrus berries just for that nice calming and rejuvenating touch. So we're just going to gently shake and activate the mixture. While we wait for the mixture to finish activating, might I ask, how did you come to intern here at the Arinar Aqua Works Labs? Really? An aspiring water trainer yourself? Well, as a water trainer, you know that it's of vital importance to understand the nature of water Pokemon, but not just the nature of the Pokemon themselves, but the nature of the almost mysterious source of their water attacks. As you know, as a water trainer, not all water Pokemon are the same, and each water attack is made up of its own molecular rather, compounds and substances. Alright, I think that we have properly activated the mixture. Let's get a few spritzes and sprays just for further relaxation. Perfect. All right. So now that we have the relaxation spritz applied, let's get a few temperature readings here. This temperature gauge is just going to allow us to get a nice plethora of samples of external surface temperature of the scales. If properly hydrated by the mixture of the humidifier as well as the lavender spritz, we should have a nice and proper, slightly cool surface temperature. So I'm just going to get a few temperature readings of a variety of placements and distances. Sometimes this readout can be a bit finicky. So, a few things that you can take note of this evening. Since you are indeed interning, you should always take a mental note of all of the practices and procedures. A lot of water Pokemon studies here at the Arinar Aqua Works labs will be similar in their structure and steps. So it's always a good idea to gather a baseline or establish a baseline that is temperature reading. That way you can take note. There we are. If there are any increases during the study or things that would cause alarm. Alright, well, we have, seems like a very standard temperature. We have an external temperature of 78 degrees Fahrenheit, alright, which is a normal reading, which is good. That means that the health of the Totodile is very good and that there are no needs for further investigation of the causes. If we were to have a higher low temperature, you would need to then, of course, find what was ailing, and it's usually an internal infection or virus, things like that. But luckily, we can get on with our much needed and focused aspect of our study here this evening. So the next thing that we are going to do is we are just going to take a quick look at some of the scale density on the surface here. So a very healthy Totodile will have a 3-to-1 ratio scale density, but sometimes it's been observed in rather powerful Totodile that scale density can get up to 5-to-1, which really not only ups its defensive capabilities, but also shows that there's a possibility of very high level and potent water molecular structure coursing through this Totodile's body. So with this little tool here, we can simply adjust the magnifying glass and apply our light just like so. And we're just going to take a look, a very close look at some of these scale areas. How about the snout? There we are. The gentle click is just enough to also be a bit soothing to the Totodile. The light helps us get a closer look, and of course, looking through the magnifying lens there, we can get a really almost microscopic look at those scales. Yes, the scale density of this particular Totodile is quite fascinating. You're not going to believe this. I'm getting a 6-to-1 ratio count here. I'll have to finish the full examination, but yes, it's rather consistent. That is quite extraordinary. I told you you were in for a treat this evening. Alright. That is just amazing. You can also really note a healthy Totodile. They are usually quite energetic. And one that rests this peacefully is likely to be quite powerful, since it knows it does not have much to worry about. Quite amazing indeed. We do have a record for this lab. Scale density of 6-to-1. Quite powerful. I would love to see the defensive EV stats and figures for this Totodile. I'm sure it would be quite off the charts, if you will. So we're going to go extraordinary count. Alright. EV yield likely high. Alright, so next we're just going to take a close look at some of those fins. So one thing that's very important with Totodiles, and another thing to look at if you are studying a more typical Totodile, you're going to want to look at the scale rigidity. They should stand perfectly straight on their own. If they are dehydrated or the Totodile is in overall poor health, they will begin to droop and won't be that really vibrant pink color. They'll begin to become a bit more muted. So luckily, of course, this is an extremely healthy Totodile. And one other thing that some interns forget is just to always ensure that the 4 fins are present and undamaged. So what we're going to do is just use our pin light here just to inspect the fins. Make sure that everything is as it should be. This is also a great chance to look for any abnormalities that don't necessarily constitute as damage or a negative, but sometimes can be something that can also set it apart and be quite unique. I've even seen Totodiles with a partial shiny pigment near the edge of the border of the dorsal fins. Sometimes you can get slight pigment alterations that can indicate a shiny gene, recessive but present nonetheless, which is usually quite a welcomed bit of news for any trainer of said Totodile, but I don't see any shiny colorations on this particular species. But once again, not the focal point of our study. So let's go ahead and look and make our notes on fin shape. So unremarkable, which is a good thing, of course. And no shiny pigment. Okay, now let's get to the focus of our study, the water samples. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be utilizing a few, of course, needleless syringes just to simply extract just a bit of that water gun, water from the mouth here, we should be able to get just enough without waking the Totodile. Of course, Totodile always have a negative pressure in their mouths when it's closed, so that water usually sits in the mouth, ready to be exerted out with water gun or any other water type attacks. So we should be able to just get enough out to get a study and fill our vial here. But before we do that, it's helpful when studying any Totodile or any Pokemon who uses the water gun attack to activate its water glands in their mouths, or cannons if we are dealing with a Blastoise, by stimulating the ears with a bit of water sounds. These sounds activate those instincts of the water Pokemon and allow it to produce just a bit more reserve water, which can come in handy when collecting samples. So just another tip and trick of the trade. So just these splash sounds of water can often do the trick. It's best not to overutilize the spray function during this portion of the study, because coupled with the humidifier, it sometimes can become just a bit too damp and cause the Pokemon to wake up, which makes the collection process just a bit more tricky. So we are just going to nice and gently create some soothing water sounds. And that should do. What we are going to do next is utilize our syringe. We're just simply going to collect just enough water from that mouth to fill our vial and send it off to pathology for analysis of those water molecules. So we're just simply and quietly going to try to get just enough water without causing the Totodile to wake up. So watch the process. We're just going to gently pull the syringe back. Good, good. And now we're going to take our bottle. We have to be extra quiet during this portion because, of course, the syringe extracting the water can be the most likely time that this Totodile awakens. So we're gently going to remove the cork, like so. And now we are going to take our water sample, a full syringe, that's a good sign, and we're going to simply add it to the vial. So, one syringe down. But we're going to need quite a bit more in order to get a full sample. So let's get our syringe back. Alright, let's get one more. And pull that syringe back gently, 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 gently. Prepare to grab our vial. Excellent. And once again, always ensure that you don't waste any of the sample. let's set that down. And let's get our syringe ready again. We should really need just one more. So once again, gently pull and fill that syringe. Excellent. Let's get our vial ready, or bottle here. And last one. Now, important, always apply the cork before moving on. So, now we have our 3 syringe worth of sample, which should be more than adequate for pathology to get an accurate reading of that molecular makeup of this water. Like I said, the readings in our pre-lab trials of that water sample that we had, of course it was an incomplete sample, so I expect the molecular structure to be even more outstanding with a full and complete sample. So let's go ahead and just mix those 3 samples together to get a nice nested sequence. This Totodile has just been the most well-behaved Totodile that we've ever had in the lab. It's just quite extraordinary in almost every facet. Quite remarkable. Alright, and that is how a water sample from a sleeping Totodile is obtained. So please make sure that you take notes when we are finished with the test. It will serve you well on your exams, I assure you. Alright, so let's go ahead and place this in the secure locker there behind you, if you will. Thank you. It's actually the locker on the left. Second. There we are. Thank you. Alright, so water samples. Let's wait 3 complete samples. No contamination. Thank you. Alright, and sent for analysis. Alright, the last thing that we want to do after samples are collected from any Pokemon, we want to just that finicky screen there. We want to take a full body temperature scan to make sure that there hasn't been any increase in temperature with that water removed. Of course, with the water activation, which we will again replenish in just a moment. Alright, perfect. As it should be. We will activate those glands and kickstart the Totodile's refill process of any water supply. So the last step that you need to complete with any water sample collection from a water Pokemon is the reactivation of those water reserve instincts, activating those water glands in the Totodile's mouth, and it will quickly replenish what was removed. And that should do it. Well, thank you so much for your help. I'll just finish up the notes there. You can actually use that desk there. Make yourself at home. It looks like if you are going to be working with us for some time, then you should get comfortable. Of course, you can utilize the PC there, store any Pokemon that you would like, take the notes that you need from today's study, and we'll get some of the area in the lab here cleaned up. Alright, and let's get this Totodile back to its trainer, shall we? Alright, if you can just retrieve that Pokeball there, we'll get it back. It's